If you've had enough of the UK or the US and you are completely ready to throw in the towel, stay tuned because in this video, I'm going to talk you through 8 reasons why you should not quit your job and move to the Caribbean, no matter how hard you might be wanting to do so right now. I'm Zoe Smith, the founder of the Exodus Collective, and on this platform, we talk through how ordinary people make their moves to the Caribbean, which probably makes you wonder, why am I telling you not to do it? Well, after 4 years of living in Grenada, I've experienced countless people move to the Caribbean in search of a dream only to find out that actually it can be a little bit nightmarish. So, what I want to do is prevent you from having that same sort of journey and really talk you through some of the issues that I see popping up again and again when people consider making their moves. So, reason number one is the financial cushion. Now, many of you reach out to me wanting information on moving to the Caribbean, telling me that you are fed up with the cost of living where you are, feeling like you're working all the time and really not getting to enjoy what you want. And thus, the Caribbean, living life under palm trees with sunny weather and beautiful beaches, feels like that's going to be the perfect solution for you. And in many cases, it will be. But the one thing I think people really underestimate is just how important it is to have a financial cushion. Now, I am sure I'm guilty of having told people to throw caution to the wind. And as you get older and wiser, you learn that actually some of the things that you think you can avoid difficult situations by just making things a little bit smoother, a little bit more streamlined. And the reality is that when you move, there are so many known knowns, but also so many unknown unknowns. And most of those unknown unknowns are going to come with a price tag. So when you're where you are typically earning your monthly salary, doing the job that you normally do, if there's a hiccup, you're probably going to have a solution. You have your monthly income, you have your savings, you also have your network that can help you understand how to navigate those things that happen in life. But when you're abroad, that isn't necessarily going to be the case. And the more prepared that you can be, the more of a buffer you can have, the easier it's going to make things if and when the surprises do happen. Anything from a tragedy happening in the family and you needing to jet back home, to a natural disaster, you find yourself without a roof, or your car gets damaged or flooding. So many things can happen that you may not typically put into your average Excel plan of how your life is going to work. That the larger the buffer that you can have to facilitate those changes that may occur, the easier it's going to be for you in terms of peace of mind, just being able to navigate the flow as and when it arrives. Now, for many of us, we may never have had like substantial savings. And I can understand that the urgency to just be elsewhere can feel really, really pressing. But if you're serious about giving yourself as many options as possible to make this move something that could potentially last for a long time, giving yourself a financial buffer is really important, which is another reason, in fact, reason number one why you should not quit your job just now, no matter how badly you want to. Another thing that I think you might take for granted are the corporate perks, the perks of the job, whether it is health insurance, travel discounts, all sorts of organizations and companies come with multiple perks that I'm sure you're well aware of that I don't need you to go through. But the reality is that while you might be completely fed up and just wanting something else, there are so many things that you might be taking for granted right now that when you don't have them, you'll really miss them. So when it comes to understanding, yes, the dream is to be somewhere else, really map down and write out what you might be giving up, because the clearer you are as to the journey that you're making, as in what is the point of departure and where I want to be, understanding what each step looks like, what you're giving up and what you're getting in return. I know it's not sexy. I know it's not as exciting as I just quit and left and everything worked out perfectly. But you don't want your life to be a story. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned in this journey of running the Exodus Collective is that the videos get the most views, that seem exceptionally romantic and exciting. That's great viewing. Like, you do not want your life to be a YouTube video. You want your life to be stable and secure and predictable and reliable with a touch of excitement thrown in. But you don't have to make things hard for yourself. You don't have to make things, exceptionally, wow, I went on this journey and I didn't know what was going to happen next. Life is unpredictable. Anyhow, the more stability that you can bring into it, especially when you're living somewhere that you haven't lived before, the easier it's going to make things for you. And what I really want you to have in your life is ease. If you're leaving behind a difficult situation, what I want you to move towards is something that is much more flowing and aligned and wonderful. So, really map out what you'll be losing if you decide to leave your job behind so that you have a really true picture as to the pros and the cons, the costs and the benefits, so that you can be aware as you decide to move forward. Another reason not to quit your job and move abroad straight away is because visas and residency are a real thing. Now, I know that where you are, immigration, migrants taking people's jobs, etc., might constantly be in the news. But just because people are flocking to your country doesn't necessarily mean that other places want you flocking to theirs. And this is something that blows my mind, the extent to which people don't understand that just because you're from the US, UK, Western Europe, Canada, doesn't mean that you can automatically just rock up somewhere else and find a job. It just doesn't work that way. And it shouldn't, if I'm being honest. Each country, each destination has to make sense of what those inflows look like, how they benefit from those inflows, in the same way that countries in the so-called global north are having those conversations. Destinations in the Caribbean also are aware of that. And the reality is that in many Caribbean islands, unemployment levels are already quite high. So if foreigners are coming in, we really need to understand how you're adding value, how you're not taking away jobs from people who are already there and are already in need. This is a really important thing to be aware of and something to really start thinking about when it comes to moving. The question really is, yes, you don't want to be where you are, but more importantly, how do you add value to where you're going to be? So a lot of folks seem to think that it's going to be really easy to just find a job elsewhere because you're qualified, etc. But really understanding the residency requirements of the places that you're looking at, the visa requirements, etc., is exceptionally important, because the chances are it's going to be a lot more complicated than you think it's going to be. I have loved those of you who have joined as a result of the last video that I did about Caribbean citizenship. And as you can scroll through the comments, and if you haven't watched that video, please do, you'll understand that actually there are a number of parameters that exist that it'll be really helpful for you to be aware of, so that you don't end up going somewhere and overstaying, being there illegally, because that is not a recipe for calmness and peace and relaxation. You don't want to constantly be thinking about what happens if you get found out, etc., etc. Yes, you have privilege as a passport holder from someone from a so-called developed country, but you have an opportunity to move forward in a responsible way. And if you can do that from the outset, understanding what is it that you're going to need in order to be able to reside in a country rather than just chancing it, I highly recommend it as a essential way forward. And I think it just brings you good vibes as you go along. And if you want someone to talk you through the residency, citizenship, etc., options that you might have for the particular country that you're looking at, I'm happy to talk you through that. Somewhere in my description, there should be a link, and you're more than welcome to book a call. But really, doing your research is essential, is absolutely essential. I think that's non-negotiable. So yeah, just do it. Just don't even think about it. Get that one done. Another issue to think about when it comes to making that decision to quit your job and move abroad is the degree to which you are experiencing burnout versus boredom. And both of those are valid reasons to choose to do something else. But the reality is that I believe, and what I have seen from multiple instances, is that it is very much worth unpicking what are the root causes of the discomfort that you are experiencing. Now, for those of us who are Black folks living in predominantly white countries, the issue of racism and oppression and everything else might feel very, very pressing. And for those of you in America, I understand even more so that that feeling of like things being exceptionally intense is real. And yet still, when you remove that issue, if you remove that issue, there are still going to be things that bug you. And the clearer that you can get as to what those are, the higher the chances are that you are going to move somewhere in a state of consciousness where you fully understand yourself, you fully understand your triggers, you fully understand your desires, so that you are not expecting your new destination to meet all your needs and then get exceptionally upset and irate and disappointed when a new country is not the magic wand that fixes all of your problems. Now, that might seem a little harsh, And if it does, it's possibly because there's a degree to which I may have been guilty of expecting a new location to do a lot. And to be honest, in my instance in Grenada, it has it's just the most beautiful place to be, but it also comes with its challenges. And some of those challenges have absolutely nothing to do with the island and more to do with my own issues that I haven't processed and done the necessary work on. And I think for some of us, moving abroad can be to a certain degree an initiation and perhaps an initiation after initiation after initiation. And for some people, that's fine, that's their journey. But for those of you who want ease and fluidity and flow, taking the time to get really clear, or as clear as possible as you can for right now, as to what's really pushing you to move. Okay, yes, sunshine is nice, beaches are nice, friendlier people are nice, but there's also some other stuff there too that you probably could do with working on. And I think if you can move in a way that you understand, okay, what does the support look like for you? Is it that you need a daily breathwork practice? Is it that you need to start journaling? Is it that you need to be more creative and express yourself through art? There's so many ways in which our daily existence can be improved. The beautiful thing is that you can even start making the changes now. Like, yes, your day job might be boring you. Yes, climbing the career ladder, you might know right now that that's not really where it's at, but you don't need to quit your job in order to make that difference. There are changes that you can start making now, and the sooner you start getting comfortable with putting in the support that you need, understanding how to nourish yourself, the greater chance I think there is that the destination that you move to is really going to be aligned with how you want to show up in the world and be able to rise to meet you in the way that you need, rather than you pegging everything on hoping that this move is going to change everything. Another reason not to quit your job and move abroad straight away is isolation. It's a factor that people don't often think about, but really understanding how you're going to build community, how you're going to find your people, how you're really going to make sure that you feel a sense of belonging really is worth reflecting on. Because as much as you might hate the idle chit chat that happens by the water cooler at work, the fact is that you do have people around you. You might not like any of them or very few of them, but at least you have people there, whether it's your school networks or university networks or whatever. The reality is, of having lived in a place for a particular amount of time, you do have a network. It might not be as big as you like, it might not consist of the people that you like, but it still is there. And when moving abroad, the chances are you may not have that, or you might not have it as easily. So thinking about how are you going to bridge that gap is really, really important. And I think, especially those of you who are thinking about quitting your job and either retiring or starting your own business or working remotely, you definitely may experience that in some locations, you will not have that infrastructure that you're used to. Moving abroad as an adult to start your own business or to retire or work remotely or whatever is exceptionally different from the sort of moves that you may have made in the past. So speaking from my experience, I moved from England to go to university in Scotland, 600 miles from where I grew up. But in a university setting, you have accommodation, you have lectures to attend to, you have situations where you're going to be around other people who are also there for the first time. And that intermingling and bonding really becomes very obvious and very easy. So that is a different setup to moving as an adult to a brand new country where you might not know anyone. So that's one thing to take into consideration. I've also moved abroad to become an employee. When I was 24, my first job out of university was working for a company in Milan, Italy. And again, I didn't know anyone in Milan, but going to an office every day, having a place in Milan, having a place in Bologna, having each person and their extended networks gave me essentially more or less a community to choose to what degree I wanted to engage and not. But if you're moving to start your own business, if you don't have that ready-made setup, or if you're moving as a digital nomad, that sense of isolation really is something to work through and to be aware of, and to take the time in advance to kind of understand, okay, what am I going to need as my touch points? Where am I going to want to find people? What sort of people line me up? Does this destination have the sort of activities that I find joyful, available? Really starting to think about what does this look like in practice is exceptionally important. One of the things that I really like to help people to work through is people coming back and saying, listen, I spent 2 weeks at Sandals. I absolutely love it. I want to move to this country. Can you help me make it happen? And the reality is, moving to the Caribbean as a result of an experience on holiday is a little bit like choosing to marry someone because they gave you a really fun time at a strip joint. It is not the same thing. Holiday life and real life are exceptionally different, especially in the Caribbean. The people that you're interacting with on holiday, for the most part, are being paid to be nice to you. When you're living here and doing things as a normal resident, the situation is probably going to be significantly different. So the better you can get at understanding how are you going to get from where you want to be to where you currently are, the easier you're going to find in terms of having a pathway to navigate through on that journey. So that's definitely something to reflect on. And point number 6 really follows on from what I was saying in the point before, which is really having a reality check about what you think island life is going to be like. Because when you're on holiday, when you're kicking back on the beach, enjoying the sun, spending all your time on the beach, for aside from those of you who are going to be retiring, the chances are you're not going to be doing that on a daily basis. And I think one of the things that can frustrate people or confuse people is that, yes, if you're in Grenada, you might have had a wonderful time on Granada's beach, hanging out by the vendors market and, doing your thing. But you're not going to be able to do that every single day without getting bored. So once you've done that, what is life going to look like for you? Or yes, you might have had a wonderful time at Carnival, but Carnival doesn't happen all year round. So when there are no events happening, what are you going to do for fun? Where are you going to find your people? How are you going to make a sense of meaning on this island? Because that is something that the Caribbean is so seductive and so beautiful, and in many ways a byword for paradise, that it can lull people into a false sense of security as to what life will be here. And the reality is that it's often much more complex and dynamic and layered than you might expect. So really, and I know it's hard and it probably feels very unfair of me to ask you to do this, but taking away the romanticism, taking away the fun sides and actually delving into the nitty-gritty is something that I would really recommend that you think about. And even if you're thinking about being here longer term, I would even suggest, hop into the accident and emergency, the emergency room, if you're wherever you're thinking to move. See what healthcare is like, see what banking is like, see what it's like to get a document from the government or to pop into somewhere and try and pay a bill, because those are the things that you're going to be doing on the regular. Yes, I very much hope that you make time for the beach and all the wonderful stuff as well. But holiday life and living somewhere are two completely different things. So the easier that you can deconstruct that, the better it's going to be for you. The next point is cost of living. Now, this is something that I think it is incredibly hard for people to get their heads around, but the quicker you can do it, the better life is going to be for you. In the Caribbean, the cost of living is high. So unless you're willing to be like a Rasta and live off grid and build your own bamboo house, catch your own water, plant all your own food, which actually to me sounds incredibly exciting, and I might just do that myself. But for most of you, that is not the vibe that you're going for. Making sure that you understand the true cost of living in the country that you're going to is really important, because so many of you reach out to me expecting most Caribbean islands to have some kind of like Mexico or Thailand or whatever vibe. That's not it. Like, most things are imported here. Most island nations are exceptionally small, so economies of scale are not going to be nice to play with. There are very little manufacturing taking place. So all of these reasons mean that the cost of living is probably a lot higher than you expect. So one thing that I would recommend doing, and this is information that I'm going to give you free of charge, is to take a look on the real estate website for some of the islands that you're looking at to understand what do you get for the amount of money that people are going to be charging. If you can, take a look at some of the supermarkets. A lot of the supermarkets you can shop online. Again, that will give you an idea as to how much things cost. And there are also many sites, and I probably will put some links in the description, that give you a very rough cost of living guide for island to island and allow you to compare the cost of where you're hoping to be with where you currently are. And in many instances, you will find that your desired destination, the cost of living is higher. So if you're quitting your job and don't understand how you're going to be making up that income, that is going to be an interesting thing to play with. So, again, getting your numbers down, understanding what adjustments you might need to make, how you might need to gain more income or cut back on certain areas of spending is really, really important. And I know that where you are, things may not be easy, but it is possible that they could be even worse than where you are. And you may not think that is possible because you are under the thumb where you are under pressure. But trust me, in the Caribbean, things are pricey. And it's not that and it's not even that you're being given the foreigner rate. It's expensive for people who live here and they're earning probably a quarter of what you're earning. The quicker you can get to grips with that, the easier it's going to make things for you. And the last reason really is that echoing everything that I said above, is that what I'm finding is that more and more people are taste testing their destination. And that is something that I would highly recommend. The desire to quit, the desire to leave, the desire to sell everything up and go, I get it. In 2025, it's probably even more pressing than it has ever been before. But if you want to be able to make the move or the moves that really align to allowing you to be in the way in which you wish to be, understanding really what that looks like, what that feels like, what that sounds like, what it smells like before you give everything else up is a really smart move, because there's so many ways in which you might end up making that work. You might decide to spend 2 weeks or a month somewhere testing it out and then go back home and realize that actually where you are from is a lot better than where you thought you were going to be, and decide, actually, I'm not making that move. Or you might understand that where you are is okay, is doable, because you need to get some money together or need to rearrange a few more things in order for that end goal to be achievable. Or you might even decide that actually, yes, destination B is amazing, but where I am can also work, and splitting my time between two destinations might be the way that I go about doing things. So really taking the time to map out a timeline, map out the steps that you need to be based on reality, like not the dream, not what anyone, even me, says on YouTube or what you've seen on Instagram, because life is not lived on a screen. It's 24 hours of reality in a place that you might not have any control over. So getting familiar with that, starting to build your network, starting to map out the sort of experiences that you want to have really, really is a smart way forward. And I'm working with a few people at the moment who are taking the time to do things, not in the adventures. Yes, fling caution to the wind and let me just rock up and see what happens. No, they're taking the time to get advice, to feel things out for themselves, to find their people, to understand, okay, where can I fit in? Where can I be of benefit? What does the transition look like for me? And that is not, as I said, it's not sexy, it's not romantic, it doesn't make for a nice YouTube video or an Instagram post, but trust me, it makes for a nice life. Because the reality is, the vast majority of people that I've spoken to about moving to the Caribbean have gone back. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It might not be for you, but the sooner that you can figure that out without selling your house or selling all your possessions only to move somewhere and realize that actually this isn't it, it will just make things easier. And I think 2025 and beyond really has to be about ease. It has to be about making smart decisions that really work for you rather than struggle or doing things the hard way. I definitely have been on a learning journey. There are definitely things that I would have chosen to do differently now if I knew then what I do now. But don't be like me. Learn from my mistakes, learn from the mistakes that I've seen others make, and really take the time to map things out, because trust me, it will make things a lot better in the future. And I know in the past that I've been guilty of, like, yeah, just throw caution to the wind. And for some of you, you're going to do it anyway because you're just that sort of person, and that's the journey that you're on. And if you are, more power to you. I hope you learn lessons along the way that help you to live a life that is truly flourishing and abundant. But for those of you who are a little bit smarter and are ready to like just do things in a way that makes sense, yeah, take the time, map it out. If you need someone to talk to so I can share my experience with you and the experience that I've seen others go through, I'm more than happy to do a consultation with you. Again, the description will contain the link. But yeah, get that pen and paper out, start mapping, start doing ideas, getting ideas down, start doing research, because yeah, you can never be over prepared. The reality is that your life abroad is going to throw things at you that you could never have imagined. So the more that you have in place in order to navigate that, the better your life abroad will be.